ask the representative from the Cannabis Licensing Authority, Janine Chin, to join us on stage. Now, the CLA has had a lot of flack, but they have absolutely the most delightful team. And it's always a treat to observe them at work, doing what they do so well. So I want to turn over to Ms. Chin and have her do what she has done for me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I first have to thank Dr. Nair for such a wonderful welcome. I hope all has been well. I know that events like this are events we look forward to every year, and I really want to congratulate the team at Rastafari RootzFest for creating a space where we can have dialogue and learn and exchange. So I want to start by really explaining what the role of the Cannabis Licensing Authority is. Often persons think that we control every aspect of the industry, but what we want to do is to explain what it is we do, how we can help you get into the industry, and give you the information you need about how you can be supported in moving along. The CLA is an entity that falls within the Ministry of Industry, Agriculture, Commerce and Fisheries, and we were established specifically to regulate medical, therapeutic and scientific use of ganja and hemp in Jamaica. You would know that regulations changed in 2015, but the CLA really only started in June of 2016. So we know in Jamaica, we're used to ganja, we see it all the time, but our medical industry really has only been around for 2 years. And so what the CLA has the power to do is issue licensing permits and authorizations in 5 categories: for cultivation, processing, research and development, retail, and transportation. Now, naturally, we're at Rastafari RootzFest. We have to acknowledge the role and the place of Rastafari and the use of sacrament. But the Ministry of Justice is actually the entity who has responsibility over the sacramental space. We, the CLA, however, do continue to have dialogue with the community because we think it's important that all persons have dialogue with us. So as we continue to develop the industry, we're doing it in a way that reflects the opinions and concerns of all. And so we create regulations. We have to do these regulations in keeping with international treaties, and I know Joseph spoke a little bit about that before, and I'll go into it a little more as we go along. And we issue, as I said, licenses, permits, and authorizations. Now, according to the regulations that we follow in regulating the industry, ganja is considered all plants of the cannabis sativa from which the resin has not been extracted, and includes any resin obtained from the plants, but does not include medical preparations or hemp. And again, according to the regulations, hemp means cannabis sativa or any part where the THC level is below 1%. And the reason it's important to understand the distinction with the regulations that governs how we can proceed with licenses and permits. Handling, of course, is any activity: cultivation, processing, import, export. And medical, therapeutic, and scientific also includes research, clinical trials, therapy, and treatment. So just an overview of where we are now. As mentioned, we would have started in 2016. We started with 1 application, and we have moved along the way. In October of 2017, we would have issued our first set of licenses. And now we are able to report at the end of November, we've received over 536 applications for processing. 179 remain at conditional approval, and I'll explain what that means. We have granted 33 licenses and issued 27 to date. And again, this is just being around and active in this space for a little over 2 years. Now, what I want to jump straight into is how we protect the Jamaican industry and what the opportunities are for small farmers. Because the reality is, as we all know, is the small and traditional farmers who have really borne the brunt and pushed this industry forward. And so, before I get into how you can apply and all this type of thing, I want to first address what the opportunities are and how we can protect the Jamaican industry. First, I want to make the distinction. There are things that are meant for traditional farmers, farmers who have been planted for decades, generations, it's a part of the family, and small-scale farmers, so persons who may not have been growing over the years but now want to get into the industry but are small-scale. And for the traditional farmers, you would have known there would have been discussions about the Alternative Development Program. Now that program is being implemented by the Ministry of Industry, Agriculture, Commerce and Fisheries, because that entity, that ministry, is the one that really creates the policies and the different programs that can allow small farmers to gain greater opportunities. There have so far been 2 communities identified, one right here in Westmoreland and another at Kampong, and recently they would have been involved in a knowledge exchange program with other countries that have similar programs. And just to make a distinction, with the Alternative Development Program, as the regulator, the CLA would not be able to implement the program. We, however, do work with the ministry to move things along. And now for small farmers, there's a particular regulation that was included in the drafting, Regulation 32. And what that does is provide room for persons to apply for assistance with regards to the cost of the licenses. We have had the discussions, we know the concerns concerning the cost, but the reality that we face as the regulator is that these costs really help us to monitor the industry. And so there are 3 things that Regulation 32 provides for. Persons may apply for a waiver of the fees, the license fee, or the security bond. They may apply to defer the fee, and so you may say you can afford to an extent to start, but you cannot afford the fee. What a deferment allows is for you to be able to start activity and at a later time when you have started to earn to then make payments towards the fee, or there may be an agreement made for incremental payments to be done. Now, we're not by any means saying this is the extent of opportunities for small farmers. Our regulations are interim. It was understood that as the industry develops, there will be things that change. There will be more things identified that would need to be made room for. But with regards to the interim regulations, these are some of the opportunities that small farmers can really avail themselves of. Now, in terms of protection of the industry, one thing that's very important, and we'd really like to stress it with small farmers, is the importance of ensuring that your integrity in the Jamaican industry is maintained. And what the regulation did for that is stipulated that for any company that receives a license, the company must have over 50% ownership and control for someone who is a Jamaican, or someone who is ordinarily resident in Jamaica. And we know that persons are eager to get investors to be involved, but always remember, this is our industry. We want to make sure that the protections are there. There's also the opportunity to register as a cooperative. Many agricultural products have cooperatives, farming cooperatives, where the community comes together and they proceed in planting and reaping and selling. What we're saying is, as a cooperative, you can also collectively put together and make an application. And in some cases, we've seen persons come forward and do that, and they've been successfully moving along the process. And what they've done is, by taking advantage of this, share the cost and the work it takes to be able to get a license. So Joseph would have mentioned some of the conventions, and in summary, what these conventions do is dictate to an extent to countries how they're able to trade with ganja. And we know a lot of the opportunity for Jamaica lies in export. And so with the creation of a licensing regime, we had to look at what does the international community require to ensure that when we put our framework together, we can take every opportunity that there is available. And so there are 3 conventions that really look at that. And what it does is provide, in the long run, an opportunity for us. Because what we've seen in talking to various countries, Canada, Israel, Uruguay, many of them, is that they are willing to look at trade, but they themselves have a licensing regime and want to ensure that any country they trade with also has the same. And so what we have done is made sure that we stay as close to the conventions as possible, continuously have conversations with the international community, and make sure that we're all on the same page so that when the opportunities are there, there's nothing to stop us from moving along. And so just quickly into the application process, as I mentioned, there are 5 different licenses that persons may apply for. The different licenses may have different categories. So for example, for cultivation, there are 3 different levels you can grow at. We are here all of today and tomorrow, so certainly if you have any questions about the form itself, you can always visit us, and we've sat with a few persons since we've been here. To apply, you can be an individual. So if you alone, you don't want to do a cooperative, you have some family land and you want to apply to be in the space, you can actually apply as an individual, and you can, as an individual, grow up to an acre, and you're limited to just cultivation as an individual. Otherwise, you would have to have a registered company or a cooperative. Now, persons can apply for any and all of the licenses. So if you decide you wanted 2 licenses, there's nothing to stop you from that. So there are 4 main stages for the application process. First, we do a desk review, and I'll just talk you through this. Once you have the application form, maybe you came today, you looked on it, you weren't so sure, you come and you sit with the CLA and we take you through it. You submit the application form with all the documents that support it to the authority. We review your application, make sure all areas are filled out, and you then progress to what's called a due diligence stage. Now in due diligence, what it means is that we take your application and forward to our partners who do due diligence checks. So they're going to do background checks, make sure that there's no convictions. There are certain criteria, and we have it all listed and we can go through with anyone. But they do these due diligence checks because, again, what we are doing applications and licensing for is a medical community. So checks are done on everyone in your company or you, the individual. And what they're trying to determine is if you are fit for the space. And what that means is, are you of good repute? Do you have the skills? Do you have any prior convictions? Anything, any money laundering? They want to make sure that all is well for you to operate in the space. And a report is then given to the authority. Now once we get that report and all is fine, there's a clean report, what it means is you're at the conditional approval stage. And what that stage means for us is you've done your due diligence, it is now up to you to complete everything you need. And often persons don't wish to start spending on premises ahead of time, and we encourage persons to wait on conditional approval. You can then get your premises ready, put the fencing, mark your areas where you're having growing, and once you feel that you're at a place that you meet all the requirements, we come in and do an inspection, a pre-licensing inspection, to confirm that everything is there that needs to be there. Once that's done, you're on your way to getting a license. And so a license will be granted, and you will then come in and have a discussion with us about where now, take the example of cultivation, where your ganja will grow. Jamaica has a closed loop system, and what that means is once you have a license, you do business with others who have a license. And one of the benefits of that is if you're growing, you know where your ganja is going. And it maintains in that loop. And so you would come in, we would identify who you're selling to, you do your agreements, and once you pay your fees, the license is granted. So just a few things we have mentioned before to ensure that there is substantial ownership by Jamaicans, that you have updated documents. Sometimes you would have submitted documents in the process and it may need to be renewed or updated. Once those are in, then you're on your way to getting your license. Now, the last thing I'll touch on is enforcement and monitoring. And in this space, we need to make sure that once we've issued you a license, that you continue to conduct in the way that the license says you should. And so from time to time, a team would visit. But enforcement and monitoring and these security requirements aren't just about the authority wanting to stand and look at what you're doing. You also want to protect your premises and protect your product and what you're doing there. And so there are some things that we often recommend that you have in place. The site inspections are done for obtaining your license, keeping your license, and renewing it. To obtain the license, we had mentioned before that we do pre-licensing inspections. So once you finish your premises and you're ready, we come and have a look. If we recognize there are minor things that need to be fixed, we'll point it out to you and so you can have it done. For keeping your license, we monitor from time to time throughout to make sure that all is well, you don't have anything that is compromised. And renewing, again, when you're coming close to expiration, we come and visit again and make sure that all is well. Now, looking at security, we ensure that your premise is secure, you have your fencing. We do require cameras as well, just to make sure that for areas where you would have entry or exit from your premises, it can be viewed, and you find that it's not just something that assists the authority, it also assists you, the person who has your premises and wants to make sure that there is no compromise of your space. So we look on things like entry and exit points as the most important thing. This is a medical license space, so you want to make sure that you don't have ganja that is meant for legal cultivation going into the illegal market or vice versa. And essentially, what I want to close by saying is the authority is eager to continue the dialogue. You'll see throughout the year going into 2019, we're in a lot of these spaces, making sure that we are able to share information and clarify. We've had many persons stop by this morning, not so sure about things in the application forms, and we sit and we take you through it. What's also important to know is that there are other agencies of government that also support the process. And so at any time, there's a question that the authority cannot really manage because it's out of our realm, we will put you in place with the relevant person so that you can get the support you need. Again, thank you. I welcome any questions. My team is also here to answer questions. And again, congrats to Rastafari RootzFest on another year and another success.
I'm just curious, in like California, Colorado, family farmers get together, form a collective, and is that something that's available for Jamaicans getting together as family farmers, forming collectives? Can they become licensed as one collective?
Okay, well, there are many Ganja Grower Association groups, and you'll meet many of them here today, who collectively discuss and lobby and look at the development of the industry and really give advice and opinion in terms of how it should be shaped. I think what you refer to as the family collective is what we refer to as the cooperative. And so there is a department where you go and register, departments of friendly societies, where you go and register your cooperative, and it means that within a community they may identify land where collectively they make the application and they all farm on that area. Yeah.
And I might have missed this. If I submitted an application, I'm sorry, I might have missed this when I was standing away, but how long does the whole process for an application take from start to finish?
All right, that's the question. If everyone heard is how long does the application take, and it's a bit subjective, and I'll explain why. I had walked you through the different stages of the application process, and once we receive the application and we send it for due diligence, that's a process that really happens outside of the authority. Typically, those reports would come back within 3 months, sometimes a little longer. And it's after reviewing that the conditional approval is given, and that then becomes up to the applicant. So whether it's taking a little time to do the premises, some persons would have had some amount of work on their premises already, maybe they were in another agricultural good and they just need to retrofit. So some of it is subjective. You really can take, I think, up to 6 months after your conditional approval is allowed. We've had several applicants actually come in and ask us for an extension because they want to either do more work on their premises. The matter and challenge of banking was mentioned before as well. Sometimes it's a matter of that. And so it really can take 6 months to a year. Really depends on your state of readiness. Any other questions?
We know you have a big voice, Katis.
Yeah, I was, yeah. Oh, we don't see the history of marijuana in Jamaica and the affiliation for our community. Is it too late or is it possible for Jamaican marijuana to be patented under the name of Rastafari?
Okay, whereas patenting really isn't within our scope. What I can say to you is that the Jamaica Intellectual Property Organization is a good organization to engage. We've met with them on several occasions. They will be participating in some of our island meetings, talking to persons about just that. What you would perhaps want to patent is things like geographical indication, because that really takes you back to the location. But one of the things that they have told us when it comes to those things, it's a process that has to be driven by the community. It really can't be driven by them.
And you said you mean the Rastafari community? Right, so I'm saying, is it patentable? Is it patentable?
There's some progress made with that.
Give it the mic.
Dickie Crawford is going to give us some help.
I'd like everybody to know that the question that you asked, that's exactly what the Rastafari movement is doing right now. In fact, they're taking the government to court to remove the discrimination measures that have been imposed against Rastafari and to come up with their own patents, intellectual property rights and everything. So that is on the way.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to, are there any further questions for the CLA? And there's a team here with all kinds of experience to help you. Any more questions? All right, we want to ask you to give Mrs. Chin a big round of applause.